Hi everyone, it's Victor speaking, and thank you for joining me today. We will be discussing Jupiter in Aries, which is going to be happening next year, but I wanted to make this a little bit longer overview of 2022 before actually I post the individual signs, so you can prepare for the year ahead very smartly. Before we jump into the topic, firstly, thank you very much for considering to join into my memberships. Now it's exciting because I've already had quite loads of people signing up, and then I'm already putting together the materials for the webinar. So it's going to be quite a exciting journey for me, and I'm very hopeful that it's going to be exciting for you too. Now you can still consider joining. As I mentioned, on level 3, there will be 3 webinars a month, and I've already put together a couple of ideas of what we can be discussing in the near future. And one of the first one, which I'm going to be launching, it's going to be a 1.5 to 2 hour presentation about critical points in the relationship. So I will be looking at relationship points and what to pay attention to when those happens. But in the next 10 weeks, I've already chosen some topics, but I'm open to discussion. So if you are curious about some type of topic or you would like to learn a little bit more, then just you're gonna have to drop me an email, or in the membership zone, actually you can put some suggestion down, and then we can discuss, those topics also. So we will be discovering the Dispository Tree, Mercury cycles, how to work with septiles and quintiles in your chart. We will be looking at a timing technique called Fedaria. Then we will be looking at planetary hours and how to use that in your natal chart, because actually they have got some very cool significance to it. We will be speaking specifically about the 12th house. It's a very misunderstood house, so I think it's time to actually gain some clarity over the 12th house and how we can use it to our benefits. We will be speaking about the dynamics of the T-square, transits to the nodes, prenatal eclipse, and how does that give us karmic signatures in our life, and then Pluto transits to Sun, Moon, and the Ascendant. So these are going to be the next 10 topics we will be discovering. Remember, 3 lectures a month. So we're going to have a week off. Each of them are 1.5 to 2 hours long, and it's all about £39 plus many other discounts involved in the membership as well. So I think it's very worthy. So if you would like to join, please go on my website, AstroViktor.com. In the menu section, you will be able to see the membership zone, and then you can choose the one which you want to participate in. So Jupiter in Aries, it is exciting, I believe. Now, Jupiter will enter the sign of Aries on the 10th of May, 2022, and we'll be there till October 28th, and we're going to have a little bit of a preview of what to expect once Jupiter finally goes into the sign of Aries. Now, Jupiter is the planet of abundance and growth and expansion and optimism, hopes, breakthroughs, and a certain element of luck as well. So what we will be doing here is we're going to be looking at what we should be expecting of a collective level, a little bit on the personal level as well. And then towards the second part of the video, we will be looking at Jupiter joining Chiron as well, which is going to be lasting basically from 2022 May till about October next year. So we will be looking at what parts you need to be healing if you want that Jupiter to work in the bestest way for you. I do believe it's going to be a remarkable possibility for us. Now, the very last time I'd like you to remind is that the very last time Jupiter was in the sign of Aries was 2010, between June and September, and then in January 2011 it went into Aries fully, and it spent another 6 months there. So firstly, you want to be looking at what was going on in your life in 2010. Now, if you think about the world, it actually started healing a little bit. Healing in a sense because we had kind of like this economic crisis situation going on. So Jupiter gave us the opportunity to heal in that department. And I think this is going to be one of the meanings definitely of Jupiter in Aries once it's connecting to Chiron. In what ways can I heal the economy? What ways can we heal the agriculture? But I'm going to be speaking about why I associate a little bit Jupiter with agriculture. So Jupiter is a planet which was actually born lucky. So Jupiter is associated with natural good luck. That's the biggest benefit in our chart. And it actually comes from the Roman myth. So what we need to know is that he was Saturn's son, and he was doomed to be eaten by his own father, but his mother saved him. And actually, he was raised on milk and honey. And then when he became a man, he had the chance to actually take revenge on his father, but instead he chose not to. And he set him free, and he asked him to invent the Italian agriculture. So that's one of the reasons why I believe that somehow Jupiter is related a little bit to agriculture. Now, Jupiter represents in your chart how you can win. So it's not just about money and abundance, but also kind of like a spiritual freedom as well. So when Jupiter goes into a new sign, or a new house, of course, then probably there is going to be something there which you need to tackle, which you need to solve. And Jupiter can give you insights of how you can do that. So there is a little bit of a cleanup to do before actually Jupiter starts showing its positive face. So Jupiter is all about growth. And it talks about in ways you can actually blossom in your life. So it's about planting those seeds. So you might have planted some type of seeds back in 2010 and 11, and hopefully this is going to be the ways you can actually harvest this year. But before we actually harvest, there is always some recycling to do. And I do believe this recycling is going to be important because the North Node and the South Node will be hitting Taurus and Scorpio axis, which means that we're going to have to let go of certain situations. But Jupiter in the sign of Aries will give us the courage to actually stand up and then do something about it. So I usually see that, for instance, Jupiter goes into a 7th house and then we are very excited about it. And, oh yes, I'm going to be finding my soulmate, I'm going to get married. And then basically it doesn't happen. Now, I'd like to point out that before anyone gets disappointed, that this is not the way how it works, okay? It's not a planet jumping into a sign and then, and then it brings you all the necessary goodies, what you want for yourself, and then you imagine. Jupiter says you must push your luck, okay? And you must understand that nothing happens immediately. So it's about, are you planting those seeds on time, which is going to be actually turning into something fabulous later on? So that's something I would like you to bear in mind. So maybe this is the period of time once Jupiter goes into a certain house in your chart, which is covered by Aries, then you're going to start initiating something. Find that inner strength within yourself and be creative and take risks. Both Jupiter and Aries are all about risk-taking. Also, look at what Jupiter rules in your natal chart. Is that related to career? Is that related to health matters? Is that related to relationship? Because probably those are going to be areas where you need to do a little bit of a spring clean as well. So Jupiter is a planet which says, you need to say yes to certain situations. So when there is an opportunity coming towards us, then I'm going to be grabbing that opportunity. Typically, people tend to find themselves around age 12, 24, 36, 48, and so forth. to be given kind of an opportunity in life. And the opportunity is kind of like described by the Jupiter sign in your chart. So I'll give you an example. Age 36, I was given the opportunity to start teaching, right? Because my Jupiter is in the natally in the sign of Sagittarius, right? But age 24, I was given the opportunity to move to another country and to start pursuing a different career there. That was also because Sagittarius rules something to do with travels. So think about your opportunities, okay? Now, of course, if you have got more planets surrounding Jupiter, then it becomes a little bit more hectic or complex. Because, of course, other planets will be coloring Jupiter's nature. So, for instance, you might be having Moon conjunction to your Jupiter. Then the mood can really affect how you are approaching that luck. But also it gives you an element of a clue in what ways you can actually achieve that. And maybe that's through healthcare. Maybe that's through using your intuition. Maybe it's about connecting with your wife or connecting with just females altogether. So I do believe that no one is really born with an element of a luck. They have to go after it to a certain extent. Of course, if you are born into a very wealthy family, that might give you an advantage, but that can be actually, lost in a sense. So Jupiter can represent your ability, your skill set, your talent, but also your approach to life as well. And I kind of love working with Jupiter, but we tend to call Jupiter as the Santa Claus planet. So it gives plenty of good things, but if you are not grabbing the opportunity, it will be taken away from you. So that's actually very important to know. There are some general cliches which probably we want to be forgetting about when we work with Jupiter, that let's say Jupiter in the 7th house or in the sign of Libra, they tend to get married really well. Or Jupiter in Taurus and the 2nd house brings us money and, and abundance in a sense. So they tend to be winning a prize, which is all good. But if there is no risk-taking involved, then unfortunately Jupiter does not know how to, work. So Jupiter, as I said, is an agricultural symbol in the Roman astrology. And as I mentioned, he trained his father to teach Saturn to actually teach the Italian farmers more efficiently for harvesting methods. So, and Jupiter, what he did was he brought plenty of rain so that those crops can grow in a beautiful way. So Jupiter is the ability to kind of crack the winning solutions to any type of problems. And these problems typically are long-standing problems, okay? And it tells you the ways how you can live your life bigger and better. And of course, Jupiter goes through those areas of life every 12 years. So, but every kind of 5 years, it gives you a brilliant opportunity because it's going to be trining your natal Jupiter. So, these are the golden years, I would call. But also, I would be looking at if there is a stellium going on in your natal chart and Jupiter goes through those planets, because typically those are quite life-changing years. Of course, let's say if you have got so for instance, Jupiter was in the sign of Sagittarius in my 10th house in 2018-19, basically. And I've got 5 planets, including Jupiter there. So it was a brilliant year because, it went through all my planets. But there was a risk-taking involved there too. I left my corporate job to pursue my dream fully. And if I didn't do that, I'm not too sure where I would be at the moment. Would it work out just as greatly as, I've expected? So with Jupiter, there is always an element of faith being put into any type of topics wherever he goes through. Secondly, there needs to be optimism. There needs to be risk-taking involved. So we call him as the great benefic, and it tends to actually increase the adventure in the sign of Aries. So Jupiter gives opportunity, luck, optimism, but this is the planet of beliefs and faith and expansion and growth. Also something to do with the long distance travels. And Aries is actually the very first sign of the zodiac. It's cardinal, it's fire. So let's just think about, for a second, fire, which is actually about flames, it's moving upwards. So it's about climbing the hierarchy ladder in one way or another. But also, Aries tends to be promoting self-confidence. It gives you courage, motivates you, it creates ambitions, it energizes you, and it asks you to initiate things. So, if we start putting together the keywords, then it actually gives you the courage to travel, to move somewhere. It gives you the kind of like the vitality to go after your opportunities and to initiate things. So I do believe that once Jupiter moves into the sign of Aries, which I do think actually it's a very positive move, because Jupiter is a hot and wet planet. And Aries is a hot and dry sign. So the heat is actually something in common. So this could be a time when we actually become very enthusiastic about maybe the future, what we have got in front of us. If you have got the faith and the trust in yourself and you trust your impulses, then I think actually it would bring you some type of financial increase as well. I think it could bring you a spiritual revolution in your life overall. It is very much about tuning into this energy and having kind of an urgency to get somewhere, to move forward. And probably, because there will be Chiron there, some of the obstacles we also need to figure out how to actually solve them, or how I can knock down those barricades right in front of me. Aries is a very competitive sign. So Jupiter is going to tell you that how are you going to be dancing along? How are you going to be walking on that fine rope, in the air to get there? So in symbol cards, Jupiter is kind of represented as a fool. And it's like trying to jump over a rock, and the dog is trying to pull him back. So actually the dog is going to be Chiron this time around here, which is going to be talking about, are you going to be able to work with your own fears? Are you going to be able to heal your self-confidence? Or are you just going to send the dog away and then try your own luck? So Aries is a young energy. This is the first sign of the zodiac. So it tends to be a little bit childlike, sometimes childish as well. So this could be really talking about that, it gives you that, think about children. They are not really scared of anything. They try new things. They don't hesitate that much. So it does tell you that you need to go and find that youth energy within yourself and then initiate something. But make sure that you learn patience as well at the same time, because Jupiter in Aries is very impatient. Right? Jupiter in Aries knows that there is so much goodies going on out there in the world. And Jupiter just goes and wants to experience and wants to learn and wants to conquer the world. It is fighting for something. Typically, it's fighting for his own belief system. And there is an element of an excitement. It's like the hero goes on his own journey to actually become someone. But the downfall of that we can push our risks, or we can push ourselves way too much to the extremes. And maybe Jupiter in Aries forgets to weigh up the pros and the cons, not looking at the consequences beforehand. Actually, it might happen. So imagine Jupiter as like an inflated balloon, and it can pop, right? It can pop when you are not expecting that. So are we talking about confidence or overconfidence here? Because Jupiter in Aries can become very, very confident. Anything Jupiter relates to in your chart is like overly stimulated. So let's say Jupiter and Moon, it's about overeating, for instance, or being overly emotional. Okay, or maybe Jupiter connects to Mars, overly driven, overly sexual. It really depends on the signs. I'm just giving you a couple of hints how to imagine that. So Jupiter also has got negative sides as well, and you should not forget that. So I give you an example, Jupiter going through the, let's say, the 7th house, and then everyone is clapping, yes, we're going to have relationship. That's not necessarily the case. As I mentioned, we need to do a spring clean in that house as well. We kind of need to start looking for those opportunities, right? But Jupiter is also telling you that each of us are just as important as the self. And that could be a little bit of a danger here in the sign of Aries, that we can be a little bit more, what's the right word? Selfish? Let's use selfish. That was another word in my mind, but I think it's a little bit rude. So let's just use selfish, okay? Yes, we trust ourselves, and we trust that we have got the ability, and we're gonna go and take the opportunities. But Jupiter also says that you should not become greedy, because sometimes Jupiter cuts corners. And this time around, unfortunately, Saturn won't be talking to Jupiter. There will be a sextile between them two at one point, which is going to be happening more in 2023. But in 2022, we can become greedy. And we just look at the individual. We look at our immediate environment, but we don't look at the bigger picture. So that's maybe one of the downfalls I would mention with Jupiter in the sign of Aries. Also, Jupiter played a significant role in gardening. As I mentioned, he did bring the huge water and the rain, so that the Italian agriculture can actually work extremely well. Now, therefore, I do believe that people in the sign, while Jupiter is in the sign of Aries, either will suffer from agricultural matters, or they will start doing something about it. Now, there will be also, while Jupiter is in the sign of Aries, we're going to have a couple of perigee full moons. Now, I will be talking about that, but it's basically a Black Moon Lilith involvement. And typically it brings in summer very dry energies, so very dry summer, or huge hurricanes. So I do also believe that Jupiter in Aries might bring something in that department as well. So Jupiter, you know, I've spoken about Jupiter a lot. We looked at Jupiter in Pisces, we looked at Jupiter in Aquarius, we've got all that. And we know that Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces. And of course, Jupiter has been in the sign of Pisces this year already, and it's going to be spending another 5 months next year also. Now, these are the two signs which actually gives us the opportunity to look at Jupiter's nature a little bit, because these are the two signs Jupiter rules, right? So Jupiter is a little bit associated with the medical field or the healing departments. You should remember that, because it does rule Pisces. But also it talks about the faith and the travel restrictions. So we saw Jupiter in action in the last couple of years very, very well. Now, Jupiter is both fire and water, and by nature, he is actually mutable. So it could indicate that he starts something and then he gets distracted and then he goes somewhere else. But Jupiter is in Aries, it's in our element, right? A sign that takes the initiatives and wants to be embracing the new. So I think this is kind of like a reset for the world, starting a new phase in a sense. But I'd like to point out that Jupiter also magnifies problems too, right? So imagine if Jupiter went into the sign of Aries and something is actually flamed up, Jupiter will make those flames even bigger, even more dynamic, more open, and then it's going to start spreading it too. So that's the reason why we need to tackle the problem first, because we're going to have to put out the fire. And how are we going to be doing that? Now, Aries is the very first sign, and Pisces is the very last sign. So let's say 2021/2022 is kind of like a karmic endings from a Jupiterian perspective, but at the same time, given the opportunity to start something fresh too. Aries is actually the second sign from Pisces. Why is that important for us? Because we do need to look at what was going on in the previous year. And previous year, we know that we had the COVID situation, we had the agricultural issues, we have got money issues. So now Jupiter can bring a little bit of a healing by stabilizing things. Second from Pisces. But also this is the fifth sign from Sagittarius as well. So that's something to do with the fun, the self-expression. So it's very possible that people are going to start talking, right? So whatever Jupiter actually started in the sign of Pisces for you, it actually can make it concrete. While something you started while Jupiter was in the sign of Sagittarius, maybe actually you will be able to express that in a very good way. So something you learned back in 2019, maybe that's going to be a way you can actually express that in the upcoming year. So I really see great stuff with this Jupiter and Aries. Aries symbolizes the self, but this is typically the unrestrained, the unedited version of the self. So Aries motivation is to become who I am meant to become, or to be who I am. It's kind of like an unfiltered mode. So it tends to be sincere, unapologetic, undestroyable in a sense. So what it wants here with Jupiter, to have faith in yourself, to have faith in your abilities, and to be you in an unapologetic way, because that could give you some type of fulfillment. Aries, it's all about getting on something. Just do it. Don't hesitate, right? It says kind of like ready, aim, and ready, fire, aim type of energy here. And Jupiter in Aries is going to tell you, what can you lose? So that's the whole idea here. So I love this confidence element here, but the trick is definitely that there needs to be a realistic vision involved, or give yourself smart targets, give yourself timeline as well. Okay, by, I don't know, June, this is what I'm going to be achieving. And I think it can actually work in a very nice way. Now, the biggest theme Jupiter actually carries is about the teaching qualities. So Jupiter wants to teach you something in the sign of Aries, and it wants to teach you to watch out for yourself, but also watch out for others as well. Probably, if we look at the teaching element, Jupiter in the sign of Aries will learn naturally, like a baby does, right? Like a baby does. It picks up the languages and the signs very quickly. So learning faster and embracing those new topics which you actually got. So Jupiter is kind of like this superhero power in our chart. And I recommend looking at your Jupiter placement very strongly. Look at the positive aspects, look at the midpoint structures, look at the house position and the sign position to kind of have a feel what ways you can have a luck going on. So Jupiter is the superhero power. So in the sign of Aries, you might feel invincible, and that could be a little bit of a problem, as I mentioned before. But on a world scale, I might imagine that there is going to be superheroes returning onto the screens. So maybe new series or new, somehow, I don't know, Superman is going to come back with a little bit of a twist or something like that. So by looking at your Jupiter's placement, shows your superpower one more time by aspect, midpoint, house position, and sign. And then also you want to be looking at how far away Jupiter will be from your natal Jupiter. So in my case, for instance, Jupiter is in the 10th house and it's going to be triggering the 2nd. So that's the 5th away from its natal position. And then you want to add this up. So in this case, Jupiter in Aries could really talk about like entrepreneurship. I think it's going to be a huge topic. People will start doing those bits and bobs. I think more and more businesses will be opening up. But the question here is the government going to be greedy and maybe increasing or changing the ways how someone can become entrepreneur? And unfortunately, I do see signs for that too, because of the Taurus North Node and South Node. But also, we know when the superheroes appear, then usually there are the supervillains also who come along with that. So there is, with this Aries quality, it's definitely about fighting against our super villains. And of course, with that Chiron, sometimes we can get easily wounded too. So it's something to be very aware of. Aries is a masculine sign, so overall, it definitely shows more Jupiter in Sagittarius qualities this time around. So it's the fighting spirit, fighting for a cause. Also, Jupiter is somehow related to your mind, information. So our mind can be on fire during Jupiter's transit in the sign of Aries. It will ignite your brain. It will give you plenty of innovative ideas. It's kind of like the lightning bolt of intuition, because fire is something which actually purifies. So it's very possible that your belief system will be purified. It's kind of a little bit of a brainwash as well. So we do need to be aware of that also. But I do believe, because this is the start of something, it's about letting go of some of your limiting belief systems as well, letting go of the past. So maybe something which rooted in 2011, and now it's about having a broader perspective on the future. Just, you know, Aries steps into something fearlessly, and sometimes it goes into an uncharted territory as well. So just watch out for how watch out how far you go with this. Because, you know, sometimes what happens is Jupiter in Aries believes that the grass is greener on the other side, and then it doesn't look at the obstacles. I think that's the only biggest thing what I would mention with this collaboration. You are encouraged to kind of shoot from the hip, and experience becomes very important in the sign of Aries. But learn from others. That's very important. By the way, I do believe with this Jupiter in Aries, self-teaching, self-learning will be important. So for instance, people might use YouTube a lot more, or different type of platforms to actually gain more knowledge about something. Maybe actually we will be seeing more how-to videos. I don't know, how to cook, how to put things together. Typically, Aries is something to do with engineering as well. So speaking about that, Jupiter can actually show you in the chart what to invest into. Typically, fire signs talk about games, something to do with sports, or it could talk about engineering also. But import and export also belongs to fire signs too. So maybe these are going to be the areas which you actually need to consider to invest into. Gaming industry, import, export, something to do with sport and lifestyle. I think it might become a lot more important in the near future. Now, also, with Jupiter, it's also very important to remember whether you are staying an eternal student or you actually become a teacher. So if that's something you want to be pursuing, then it could be a brilliant time to start teaching and coming away from that student zone, because probably you've learned enough. And with that Chiron trigger there, maybe it's your fear that I wouldn't be a good teacher in one way or another. And I'm not talking about university teaching. I'm not talking about primary school teaching and all those type of things. What I'm talking about is that I'm going to be sharing something with others. And I'm going to be sharing my opinion, my value system. Speaking about opinions, which Jupiter's rules territory also, we can become a little bit very opinionated, let's put it this way, with Jupiter in the sign of Aries. Biggest question is, what is your life purpose? Jupiter wants you to actually explore that. How are you going to make your own luck? How are you going to embrace the power to take the steering wheel in that car and then heading into the right direction? Stay open to new opportunities, solutions, relationships, because Jupiter is the benefactors in your life. So actually, can I benefit from a gym instructor, Aries? Or can I benefit from a engineer, Aries related energy? Okay, so the biggest lesson with Jupiter in Aries is to start thinking about what your life purpose is. Now, also, just speaking about the mundane part of Jupiter, well, Jupiter rules religious leaders. So it's very possible that we're going to have a lot more talks about religion overall. Typically, Jupiter in Aries, I'm going to put a picture up in regards to Jupiter in Aries from the symbol on cards. And then you will be seeing this kind of like soldier priest type of energy who is sharing, you know, motivates the soldiers and so forth. So it's very possible that the religion overall is going to become a little bit more important. I do believe there will be some scandals around bankers. Jupiter can rule the bankers. And the scandal is because the South Node is going to be in Scorpio. So where their money comes from, where their money goes, it could bring actually a new phase in the teaching. So maybe just the education system will change significantly. It rules over lawyers, solicitors as well. So how will the law change overall? And that's one of the reasons why I believe that maybe who wants to become an entrepreneur, they're going to be changing the tax around it and so forth. Typically, Jupiter talks about prosperity. So overall, where does your prosperity come from? Maybe they're going to be boosting the tax office a little bit. There will be more kind of like controllers overall. And that's coming from the Scorpionic energy, which is actually like the ticket controller in your chart. So I'm expecting some new initiatives around those topics. Now, Jupiter also associated with travels, so probably there will be ways of how the travel is going to be happening, maybe a new law around that. But Jupiter is also advisors to the heads of state, so the ministers, diplomats, top political and administrative positions. So we might be seeing some type of changes around that too. But it does indicate, it does talk about financial institutions as well. So I'm expecting some banking system change also. Maybe innovations, maybe some troubles in banking, because the South Node will be in Scorpio. Okay, Jupiter does talk about astrologers also. So probably we're going to see a lot more clients approaching astrologers, or we're going to see a lot more astrologers coming on social media channels also. Jupiter rules over business consulting and overall the financial services. So, you know, they're going to start a new technique, surely. On a positive note, I think it's going to be somehow the rebirth of the financial market as well as the agricultural situation. I'm really hoping how they will try to motivate people to spend more money is by giving something to them. Kind of bringing that optimism back into people's life. So I kind of believe that that might be that might be something to actually consider here. Okay, so Jupiter is the higher perspective is always about looking for different type of perspectives. Just a little problem is that it's a little bit not so analytical, not so detail driven. So that's what we're gonna have to learn. Overall, I would say that Jupiter is kind of like in the sign of Aries is a self-promoter. So how are you going to be promoting that house position where Jupiter is? Jupiter is typically the public relations. So who you will connect to, how are you going to have a new look? How are you going to be relaunching maybe your name, your brand, your style, your shape, your body, or whatever you want to be actually promoting. So promotions will be very significant. So this is my intake on Jupiter in the sign of Aries. What's your intake on it? I would love to see how you approach Jupiter in the sign of Aries. I'm sure I will be making another video about Jupiter in Aries. One more thing which I'd like to point out, that definitely there is plenty of Jupiterian quality. There is going to be a mutual reception actually between Jupiter and Mars, because when Jupiter goes into the sign of Aries, Mars will be on 16 degrees of Pisces on top of my head. So mutual receptions are very strong. One keyword which really comes to my mind is about fighting for your own rights. And therefore, there is a little bit of a volatile energy involved around this Jupiter cycle. But the individuality will start thriving, in my opinion, especially in the next 12 years. So thank you, everyone, and see you soon with the Mars retrograde in Gemini. So you see now how important Mars will be, because it's going to be ruling Jupiter for a year also. So see you soon. Bye-bye.